So, speaking of things that we can talk about and can't talk about on today's episode, because you guys are both active duty law enforcement, we don't have to delve into it too much, but I got to say, yesterday's interaction with that upset parent during kids class.
Oh, I didn't see this.
That was the strangest interaction I've had
Yeah.
as a academy owner in 10 years.
Well, what was so weird is I ran out to my car, came back in, and I was like, something feels different in here. And yeah, because that's right when the interaction must have happened when I ran out to my car and came back.
Yeah, because, so Marcus, I don't know if you know this, there was a SWAT call out 2 houses down.
Oh, wow.
Perimeter was here. So like there was cops everywhere. There's lights on. Yeah. And it's funny because several students are like, are they coming to take you away? I was like, no. This is that's 3 doors down.
Unrelated.
Yeah, unrelated. Yeah. But so you were going out there. Were you checking in on that, kind of seeing?
Yeah, I was running out there just to make sure and see what was going on with that.
Okay. And when I left the gym at 8:30 at night, they were still out there holding perimeter. So I brought them a bunch of First Form energy drinks and beef sticks and stuff.
Nice.
Cool. And I was like, I know how bad perimeter sucks, guys.
Yeah.
So this will keep you going a little bit. But no, dude, I had a parent walk out onto the mat. And this lady was like, you know how you've seen me do it 100 times, have the kids hold static leg raises, you know?
Yeah.
And she goes like super condescending. And it was the craziest interaction I've ever had at the gym. She's like, I know you think you're like this Mr. Drill Sergeant or something, but this isn't fun for the kids. The kids here need to be having fun. And if I ever, she goes, and just so you know, like how things work around here. I was like, wait, what? Because Craig normally teaches that class and he's out on surgery. So she thinks I'm just some guy covering, you know?
Yeah, filling in for Craig.
And she goes, I don't know if you know how things work around here, but we keep the class fun. And you're like Mr. Drill Sergeant. And if you do that one more time, I will be canceling my membership. I was like, all right, well, we can come to a conclusion immediately because your membership is already canceled.
Yeah.
And she didn't like that. And so then it went from there. But we don't need to get into that. I'll tell that story in great detail.
Well, the
best
next part
episode.
Is you go from that to no-gi and then Greg picking his uki. And I'm like, not me.
Yeah, some frustration to work out.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your profession is or what you do. You're going to deal with people that you are just incompatible with, you know? And you would think something like a jiu-jitsu academy. I mean, literally on my website, our team motto says, train hard, train often. And that goes for kids and adults. And you know, Marcus, you've seen how hard those kids train.
Oh, yeah.
Your son is the standout athlete of the team before you stole him from me.
Well, what's so cool is setting the standard high for kids, because then it's something that they actually want to achieve. Like they don't just think like, oh, that's only what adults do and we just play around. It's like, no, we can train for something and we can achieve something too. Well,
yeah. And that's why I thought it'd be a good segue for this show, is because one thing she said to me, she's like, you are so mean to those kids. And you guys know me. I'm not a mean coach at all to the adults or the kids. That's not how I roll around here. But there's a certain percentage of society that looks at hard physical work as almost like a punishment. And it's like men like us, we look at hard work as like a gift, an opportunity. You were out here, like when I walked in and opened the studio 15 minutes ago, you were out there busting your ass, drenched in sweat. And I was like, oh, of course, Marcus got one in before we started recording, you know?
Yep, can't miss it.
Yeah, and the sad thing is like that is something that I want to impart on the children here. Because if you're never taught about physical fitness and prioritizing your health and prioritizing your body, if you're never taught that as a young person, how hard do you think that would be to like jump on that train at 30 years old?
Yeah. Well, so much of our culture and society is like shielding away or hiding from discomfort.
Yes.
And rather than realizing that more often than not, that's the key to actual growth and change and getting anything that you want. And it's not something to be afraid of. It's just uncomfortable and only for a moment. And then you get to where you actually want to be.
Yeah, dude. It's really strange to me that like that concept is still lost on people. But something that kind of like made me take a step back and look at myself was after the surgery. I was only out for 2 months, right? And I don't even really like there's people that break their necks and come back and like they were paralyzed for 2 years and now they're an athlete again or whatever. I don't have a big sob story, but just a little tiny taste of what it's like to not be active for 2 months and then getting active again. And it was kind of tough. It was harder than I thought it would be. And I was kind of surprised at like how out of shape I felt. And I was like, dude, for someone that's been an athlete my whole life, I take 2 months off. And now I feel like I'm almost at square one. How do those people like on my 600-pound life feel?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, different than your experience, but when I was out for a while, it's weird because I almost went through the stages of grief. I stopped and I felt depressed, and I even talked to you because I was like, man, for 14 years, martial arts has been how I've relieved stress, relieved marital problems.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, you get out of it. You're not doing anything physical. And then you're coming back. You're like, I don't know. Do I even come back? Because, yeah, it's weird. Just taking 2 months off changes everything.
Your injury that you had surgery on is very prevalent in the jiu-jitsu world. So tell everybody what happened.
Yeah, so I started noticing just neck pain that was kind of radiating down my left arm. And I probably should have just stopped or taken it easy, but instead, what did I keep doing? Same thing.
You kept training, of course.
Most of us do. I would take ibuprofen before gym. I'd train. And then one day we were rolling. Daniel got me in a head and arm for probably the 7th time, and I kept fighting it. And then after he let off, I was like, man, this hurts. This hurts bad, and it's hurting while I'm warm. So it's only going to hurt worse once my body cools down. So then it got so bad to where my left arm was just pretty much paralyzed, and there was kind of radiating pain down there. So I got an MRI finally, and they found out that I had 2 herniated discs in my C5, C6, and then C6, C7. So ended up having to go get surgery on it right away. They didn't even try any rehab or anything or cortisol. They just looked at it.
What was the timeline between you're like, hey, I'm hurt, the night that Daniel squeezed your neck, hey, I'm hurt, to like, you're going under the knife?
So it was 2 months, but that delay was because I first went to the walk-in clinic and they did the classic, hey, just ice it, take ibuprofen. And then after 2 weeks, I kept going back saying like, hey, it is not getting better. I can't work. I can't, I reached a point where I tried putting on a sock and I started crying because I just wasn't sleeping. I was in so much pain. So then they finally did an MRI, and then they saw it the next, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you need surgery. You need surgery. Like this is our bad."
And they aren't, and that's a tough thing for medical professionals because they're not used to men like us that just suck it up and drive on. They're used to like, I need pain medication for this and that, and so it's like, I think they're hesitant.
Yeah.
To think like, oh, this might be a serious ailment.
Yeah. Like when I go to the doctor, it's because I've done every WebMD, everything I can. Like I'm trying to
self-diagnosed yourself 10 times.
I'm trying to save that $10 copay. So I did not go to the doctor freely, And so, yeah, it had to get pretty bad, but.
And then the surgery it went pretty flawless. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Surgery. They replaced 2 of my discs with artificial ones, and only time I've ever been under in my life. And it was funny because the anesthesiologist was like a Bill Cosby, because he puts a shot in and goes, hey, this won't put you out. It's just going to kind of relax you. That was the last thing I remember.
That's a good anesthesiologist.
Yeah. Yeah. Like last thing I remember is him being like, yeah, don't worry. I know you're stressed about going under. This won't put you under. Just relax. And that was out.
Man. So, dude, my first surgery, they wheeled me into the OR, and it was like ice cold, and there was all of these medieval weapons that looked like something out of Braveheart, and they put the needle in my arm, like, start counting. And I was just like, dude, this feels like a horror movie.
Yeah.
My hernia surgery a couple months ago, same shit. They were wheeling me down the hallway, and that's the last thing I remember. She got me,
Yeah.
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
So when you woke up from that, then were you immediately like, could you tell like, oh fuck, I'm on the road to recovery? Like, did it feel better immediately?
Yeah. So the pain immediately went away. The nerve damage, like for the probably 4 months after surgery, I couldn't open up a deadbolt with my left hand. I couldn't open it. I have a Benchmade Infidel knife. Even now, I still have some permanent like I can't tell how hard I'm squeezing or how hard I'm pushing with my left arm, which is probably why you get out of some of my submission attempts. It's surely, an 88 issue.
Have you used Daniel's grip strength measurement?
Yeah, and so it's not that much below what it used to be. It's just I don't have the feedback.
Okay.
Like when I squeeze something, I can't tell. But then doing I think 4 months of sports therapy afterwards definitely proved. I mean, it's a million times better than what it was.
And I don't remember, how long was it before you rolled again?
Not long enough, because you kept telling me like, hey, go light. But I think I came back and I was rolling within 3 months.
Well, bro, you're one of those guys, and this isn't negative, because there are guys that are frantic and out of control, and then there's guys like you that are in control, but you go hard.
Yeah.
Both you guys. You know what I'm saying? And I just knew, I was like, oh, man, I was worried.
Yeah.
Because I knew that it would be hard for you to roll lightly. Like, who you going to partner up with, like little people that that's just not you. You're like a mark. Like, I want every round to be the toughest guy in the room.
And looking back, you're so right. To be honest, it was ego. It was me sitting there going like, oh man, if I'm sitting on the bench where other people roll, are they thinking I'm a bitch right now? like me just literally looking at it going like, I can't sit out. I've gotta.
You only just had discs replaced. You've been on the team for almost 8, 9, 10 years.
Yeah.
And I wonder if people think you're a bitch. Not one person was thinking that.
But
we're our own worst enemy, bro.
Exactly.
It's so hard though to sit on the sideline and see other people training hard and
I know
progress out of it, and you're just statically watching. Like it's stressful.
What if they learn something I don't know, and then I show up and they just dominate me?
But here's the crazy thing about jiu-jitsu, because like Tyler, I was teaching triangles on Monday, and Tyler's like, dude, I'm one of your brown belts that's been here a long time. And something that you said about the triangle today clicked in a way that it's never clicked before. And he goes, my triangles got better in a moment.
Yeah.
In a single moment in time, I feel like I understand the triangle better. As someone that's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, that happens forever though.
Yeah.
It's one little nugget. And if you miss the night where that one little nugget that you could use was taught, your game is going to take a little bit of a hit where someone else's grows. Yeah. And that's actually... I talk about it a lot on the podcast. One of the best things, or I should say one of the most important things about being a good teammate is consistency. And it's not just for your jiu-jitsu, it's for your team's jiu-jitsu. Because if you show up and you're someone that pushes people and you bring like a tough game to the mat, people need that. And if you sit out, that hurts the entire team, One
of the things that's so cool about jiu-jitsu is how it teaches that mindset of identifying the nuances that make a world of difference, because it applies to almost everything else. Like I've seen it countless times in shooting and weightlifting, even in how you approach your relationships, paying attention to the little nuances that maybe if you were a complete beginner wouldn't make a big difference. But as you get deeper and deeper into a subject matter, they can completely change your game and make you so much more effective.
Yeah, no, and I say it all the time, jiu-jitsu mirrors life.
Yep.
And all those little things, it's something that I know people fucking listen to us talk about jiu-jitsu and they think we're like crazy, right? But once you invest enough time in jiu-jitsu and you feel that and you see that firsthand, there's no denying it.
Yeah. Well, what I think is funny, kind of mirroring what Marcus said, is it's that self-reflection in jiu-jitsu that my wife will never understand. She's like, how'd you sleep last night? I'm like, horrible. I was up all night rethinking that one round where I got swept or where I couldn't finish that submission. And it kind of teaches you because there's no excuses. It's not like football or basketball or these other sports, which are great, but you can say, hey, it was a bad ref. It was my teammate messed up.
That's right.
The other team. It's just on you. When I get submitted, it's because I screwed up. When I can't submit Marcus, it's because I screwed up. And so it teaches you that self-reflection of, what can I improve? What did I do wrong? That I think, circling back to what we talked about in the beginning, lots of kids nowadays, they don't get that. You look at how their papers are getting graded in school. You look at, different parenting styles, and they're not getting that, hey, you need to take ownership. Every action has a consequence. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but how do we self-reflect on that?
It teaches accountability and humility. And the humility aspect of it is one of the things that is really challenging about jiu-jitsu, but also what's so cool is that anytime you get to whatever skill level it is, there's always somebody that's going to push you. And there's always the ability for the white belt to catch you, right? And so you constantly are self-reflecting.
I got caught by a blue belt last week.
Nice.
And that's the first time I've been submitted in, I don't know, maybe a year. You know, which, and I don't, like, that's not a good thing. Don't get me wrong. Like, you want people to be on the mats that can submit you regularly. That would be what's best for my jiu-jitsu. But we're also in Lake Stevens, Washington, and inevitably, once you become a decent black belt, it takes someone that's pretty good to be able to submit you. And I just don't find myself, like, me and Daniel will have barn burner rounds, but I don't think we've submitted each other one way or the other in like 5 years.
Yeah.
You know?
It's tough when you know each other's
And that's,
games that well too.
That's the other thing of it. Like, you watch, sometimes I'll watch like Skylar and Zach have like a round that could be on pay-per-view. You know what I mean? Just a barn burner.
Yeah.
And then if you watch me and Dan, people would be booing and getting up and leaving the stands because we just kind of lock onto each other and we understand each other's offense and defense so well that it almost becomes just like a stagnant, neutral match.
Yeah, preventing things long before they're even about to happen.
But the thing that's fascinating about it is it's like, you guys know, it's like if I move my hip a half inch this way and then put pressure with my knee here, this prevents him from doing this and that. Like, there's so much going on, but to the observer, there's nothing going on.
Right.
And it's like I talk about when I'm teaching jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of invisible jiu-jitsu happening. And that's why I don't think jiu-jitsu will ever be a spectator sport.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like side control. I think side control is amazing because it is so tough to teach and to show what that pressure feels like.
Yeah.
Well, once you have it dialed down, like, it's a world of difference. But if you were to look at, your side control versus a white belt, to the naked eye,
Looks the same.
It looks the same.
Whereas like at brown and black belt, or even Marcus, because Marcus is just an anomaly.
Yeah.
We could tap probably 99% of Americans with side control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? Marcus, what got you into jiu-jitsu initially?
Well, I've been interested in it a long time. Like, I grew up wrestling. I did like submission grappling when I was in college, and then really was around a lot of guys that got into it just in law enforcement and SWAT teams, and so then it was a matter of finding really the time, right? Like, I was pretty competitive in like the CrossFit fitness world, and really active in my shooting and SWAT training and stuff like that. And so then finally kind of carved out some time that I could get in and get on the mats. And I'd missed it for years because I absolutely loved wrestling, loved grappling. They're probably the sports that I enjoyed the most. I played a bunch, but they're also the ones I seemed to be naturally better at, and my body type and height didn't prevent. So yeah, so that was a big part of it. And then my kids both showed interest in getting involved, and so having something that I could bring them into and do with them was really motivating. And so that's what got us all on the mats.
So when you guys came upstairs, was that the first time you jumped into gi jiu-jitsu then?
I had tried out another gym farther south because we lived down in like the Briar area. And no knock on it, it's a good gym, good spot, but we moved shortly thereafter, and it was already a challenging drive when we lived south. And so when we came up here, I already knew about this gym. I had friends, some teammates that went here, spoke highly of it, and so came right in. And, yeah. Because,
dude, I don't know if you remember our first roll. I'll never forget our first roll.
Oh, that's cool.
Because you're a new white belt. And the thing is, like, you never know. Me and Dan were just talking about this. And Dan's rule is everybody gets 100% of me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Until I learn that I can turn it down. Right? Because he goes, I've been fooled by too many white belt wrestlers, and that will never, and that will never happen again. Right? But the second we locked horns, I was like, once you understand grappling, you can just, a collar tie tells a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as soon as we locked horns, I was like, oh, this motherfucker really understands grappling, base, movement, angles, all the stuff. But what surprised me the most is when I went for an arm bar, I went to cover your head, and you put your hand up and you pushed it off and sat into it to pressure with the back of your head on my leg, so I couldn't get it over the head. And I was like, this is beautiful textbook armbar defense. this motherfucker isn't just a wrestler. There's more going on here, you know? But then you told me, you said you did pancreation and stuff for a while. And I was like, okay, it's coming out. And I tell people all the time, once it's in there, like you might get rusty. Your timing may get off a little bit. Your fitness can certainly take a hit. But once the jiu-jitsu's in there, I think it's in there.
Yeah, I agree. It's even like we were just talking about, like when you're away from the mats for a little bit, being worried about all the progress other people are making. And when you step back out on the mats from a break, I'm always worried that like, oh man, I hope I remember anything. And then the second you actually start, it's like it all comes kind of naturally flooding back. It's how you view the world in a way, as opposed to like remembering to do something. It just,
yeah, it's second nature.
Yeah.
And like when I came back from surgery, I was thinking all those same things. But I've also had enough breaks in jiu-jitsu that I typically come back stronger from. I think our brain needs to like defrag or something every once in a while, you know?
Yeah, I notice I will overthink jiu-jitsu sometimes. It's those rolls when I come in and I'm tired and I'm just like,
fuck it.
Yeah, I'm not going to do good today. Those are usually my best rolls ever. It's when I'm like, man, I want to hit this armbar or I want to work on the sweep. I overthink it. I'm too rigid, too tense.
Yeah. Coming in all excited about like, man, I'm really on a good trajectory. This is going to be great. And then run into a buzzsaw.
It's nuts, man.
Yeah.
Well, and I think about that regularly. It's like, what is the best approach for me to have a good night? Now, an important thing to bring up too is you have to have shitty nights. Yeah. If you didn't have those shitty nights, there'd be no contrast and you wouldn't know the difference between a good night versus a bad night. So I tell people all the time, bad nights are actually a gift because that shows you the contrast of good nights. Otherwise, it would just be, everything would be neutral, right?
Yeah.
And in the words of Beavis and Butthead, if nothing sucked, then nothing could kick ass. Right?
two greatest philosophers to think our children will never know. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because talk about Marcus. I think the greatest compliment you can get when you show up to a new gym is when someone goes, "Where else have you trained?"
Yeah.
That's me saying like, that was a hard roll for a white belt. Or yeah.
And bro, I said it the other day. We got a bunch of like Adam. Have you guys rolled with Big Adam?
Yes.
And Cajun?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like these big white belts that are phenomenal wrestlers.
Oh man.
And it's like, come on, dude. If you show up at my gym being a good wrestler, just be 205 pounds or below, please.
Yeah.
Because both of those dudes are like
probably
280 or something.
Yeah.
And move fast, dude. And I've got a couple rounds with Adam now, but I haven't got a round with Cajun yet. And people are like, he's basically a young Craig. And I'm like,
oh wow,
great.
His snap down to double leg is fast. Where I sit there, I do the old relying on a guillotine.
Yeah,
Going like he took me down. I'm going to pretend like this was part of my plan. But yeah,
I'm where I want to be.
Yeah, exactly.
What about you, Andy? This was your first gi jiu-jitsu gym, correct?
No,
or did you dabble elsewhere?
I trained at Team Wise down in Linwood for about a year, and then I moved up here, and then just the drive. I found the commute was one more excuse for me not to train. And so Zach Yates started coming here, the Linwood cop, and he reached out to me, and I was like, oh man, this is 10 minutes from my house, right down Highway 9. So yeah, then I started training here, but yeah, I was a white belt still at the time.
Yeah, Andy's going to be the first white to black.
That's exciting.
Under the electric banner.
Yeah.
Which is fucking cool, man.
Yeah.
But
another few years probably.
Yeah.
4 or 5 more years, right?
Yeah,
you'll get there.
It'll be one of his other instructors at that point, yeah.
How long have you been a brown belt again? Is it 3? It'll be 3 this summer?
I feel like if I say 4, it increases my chances. To be honest, yeah, I think 3.
So I tell people this because I don't really know. I mean, I'm new. I shouldn't say I'm new as a coach, but I'm new to promoting. I don't have a lot of brown and black belts. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's always, and I'm always kind of like reanalyzing how I promote and how long and how much work people need to put in. Like there's this big formula and it's literally different for everybody. You've been one of the most consistent. I mean, you've seen this gym go through all of the growing pains, all of the phases. Yeah. I joke all the time. It's like there was nights when there was 4 of us.
Yeah, and it was me. It was me, you, Mark, and Greg.
Yeah,
our Daniel.
Dan,
yeah. And I'd show up on Friday night rolls, being like, "Well, this should be fun."
and it's 90 minutes of nonstop to the death with just tough motherfuckers, dude.
Yeah.
And now it's grown so much that like, and I don't think this is a bad thing. It's actually a good thing is that now we have a much more diverse group of people to train with. And you can have those death rounds as much as you want. Or if you want to be like, hey, let's flow with some of the white belts and like just get some movement in. That's available now. That wasn't available in the past.
Yeah. But what you've done an incredible job at, which I think is super hard to do with gyms, is you've grown the business without losing the culture.
Bro,
that is tough to do because, you know, at a certain point, it's also business. You've got a mortgage payment. So you need customers, you need students, but you also don't want to dilute what you're about and what the culture is.
That was something that was very deliberate. And I thought about it a lot because when I was a police officer, this place was more of a club, right? Like it broke even. The place never generated any type of money, but as long as it's breaking even and I have good guys to train with, like that's a win, right? I didn't care at the time. And then when I went all in with jiu-jitsu, I was like, well, what do we need to do to be one of those gyms that actually does become financially viable? And I was concerned because just like you said, if you dilute the product to appeal to everybody, well, what does that say about your jiu-jitsu, right? I never want to start to encroach on like a McDojo style of jiu-jitsu, but I had an epiphany. I was talking to Joao about this, and it's like, if I build a gym that only attracts men like you, as cool as that is for the three of us to get nasty rounds, the truth is we are the three least people that need jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like we're likely to win I've won every street fight I've ever been in, even when I was a dumb kid, just because I was fit and aggressive. And we all kind of carry that mentality. The people that need jiu-jitsu are the people that literally need it to become capable and being able to defend themselves. So that shouldn't mean that it's being watered down. It means we're going to tailor the gym to the people that need it most while simultaneously still having a core group of savages that are down for death rounds every single night.
One of the things that's been really neat too, though, is to see people that maybe they're not as interested in to the death intensity of every single round, and yet still really buy into and are really just as much partners in the culture behind that mindset.
Yeah, dude. And that's kind of been, for me personally, that's been like the biggest, like some of my proudest moments at this gym is seeing like, dude, we got Eli's mom and Tyler's mom and Guy's training with the team. Who would have thought we'd have ladies in their 50s training with us? That's so outside of who we used to be. But every one of those people brings good positive energy, and you feel it now. You walk into the mat room and it's like, yes, dude. And there's lots of people that don't have very good jiu-jitsu. And that's what we should be doing is teaching those people good jiu-jitsu. And then also simultaneously, you always need to focus on yourself too. So it's like, okay, today I'm going to roll with the toughest guys in the room. And then the next day I might flow roll with white belts, you know?
It's a testament to a lot of the guys training here too, guys and girls, but the ability to remain under control, to approach a round with, like a death round with Andy, and then realize that, well, this next round, that's not appropriate. That doesn't, it's not going to serve me and it's not going to serve my training partner. And so being able to remain under control while still helping people push themselves and find ways to get better.
Do you think it's funny? Because me and Dan literally sat on the bench and talked about this last night, because there was a white belt that was going kind of hard on the girls, right? During rotation training. Because a lot of times the girls manage their roles well because they have the privilege of choosing, and if they say no, like that should be respected as a female. But rotation's a little different because you just step up and it's like, oh, here's an opening, and he's like, dude, that dude was like smashing on the girls. And I said, when I started jiu-jitsu and MMA, there wasn't really females in the room. It wasn't like that back then. And so I was like, I wonder if I would have had that control as 22-year-old big, strong athlete to understand like, hey, this girl's starting to beat me. Do I go Donkey Kong or do I just train with her? And Dan goes, I think that's either in you or it's not. I don't think that's necessarily a learned skill, but I'm not sure. I'm kind of torn on it because you definitely learn how to control your intensity as you progress on the mats.
That, and then I think a big part of it is also ego too. Like,
100%.
A great example is Jordan. Phenomenal wrestler. And yet I'll catch him in stuff, and I know that if he wanted to just overpower or just go, he'd be out of it. But he doesn't. He slows himself down. He tries to work through. He tries to jujitsu.
He tries to use technique.
Yeah.
And that was, we were still upstairs when I saw it, where I had him in an armbar. I'm like, man, if he wanted to, he could just, wrestle his way out of this and just use force. And so I think that was a turning point for me where I'm like, if a white belt gets me, or if a female escapes from something, cool. Good for them. I'm gonna focus on technique and not that strength. But it's dialing back that ego of who cares if I lose.
Yeah. I think meeting people where they need to be met, and it can be different for everybody.
Yeah.
You got young kid like Christian, right? Who is he's 3 times as strong as you think he's going to be based on his body type, right?
Yeah.
He kind of needs you to turn the dial up and kick his ass a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you need to feel that. Yeah. And that's not a knock on him. When you're a young man and you bring intensity to the fight, you get matched with intensity. But if you bring a little kind of timid energy and you're unsure of yourself, it's up to us to meet them there and kind of show them the way.
Yep.
I don't know, man. It's like jiu-jitsu is like a nonstop social experiment.
Yeah.
Just learning about everybody and what the best formula is and all the stuff. It's cool to see how and you've said it to me the other day. You're like, bro, you're like becoming a very competent coach.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh, so the last 6 years I sucked. Is that what you're saying? No, but it's like, I feel like it's all starting to come together.
Yeah.
Until last night. And then the wheels fell off for a little bit.
You recovered fast.
Coaching and teaching people is just such a massive skill set. And it's one thing to be able to create a certain end product, right? You could take people that are maybe more like Andy and I and get them to a certain spot reliably. But the ability to train people like that, but then also take people from other walks of life and other approaches and other interests and even goals and still help them get where they want to go while also teaching them about themselves in ways that they didn't realize were even there.
Yeah.
And that's what's really, really demonstrates a good coach.
Yeah. And what I've found is like the most rewarding aspect of a coach, because like both of you guys show up, you're fit, you're active, you have good strength, you have good mobility, you're quick, like
a little better than Andy in those things.
Yeah, that's right. A little. Yeah.
I'm taller though, so
But when somebody walks through the door with the physical attributes to be a grappler, dude, I just have to teach you jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like everything else is already in place, and that's awesome, right? And I actually really like working with people like that. But what I found that I equally like is people that their body doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
And they are out of shape and they don't move very well. And seeing them go from being in a body that's not serving them, and like I had Steven Hand on the podcast because of it. He keeps getting hurt now, which is a terrible way for this story to end. But he went from like 280 to 230.
Wow.
On the mats.
Yeah.
To me, that's a bigger life change than like, hey, Marcus has a good armbar now.
Right? Yeah. It
You
really
know?
is. Yep.
And so like, it's cool seeing the gym serving people in the capacity they need to be served.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll never forget, and I'll be telling this story at your black belt promotion, how we met.
Oh,
I remember my first roll with Marcus. I don't remember my first roll with you, but I remember the day we met. You were wearing the Rocky Balboa.
Yes,
onesie.
down at the police academy training, and
So we were doing. They bring in people that are actually pretty highly trained to do testing.
Yeah.
Right? For their like fight for life type thing.
Yeah, I've heard about it. Yeah.
And so like I forget who first reached out to me, but they're like, dude, if you want to go down to the police academy, they pay $500 a day.
Oh, wow.
To do fight for life with recruits. And I was like, I'll go beat up people who don't know how to fight for $500 a day. I'll tell you what, those are some of the most grueling days I've ever had in my entire life.
Yes, you work for the money,
bro.
It is exhausting.
You beat up 30 people.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's not it's not like if you and I did 30 rounds, right?
Yeah.
If you and I did 30 rounds, don't get me wrong, it would be gnarly because that's a lot of work. But when we understand fighting, there's kind of a dance to it.
Yeah.
Guys that don't know anything, there is no rhythm, there is no dance. It's like you can't do that in a fight. Well, he just did it.
Yeah, there's no throttle control, and there's not any pacing. Like they're not going to hold back for their stamina or their strength. It's like you're getting all of it now.
Yeah, yes, dude.
Yes, and they think their career depends on this fight. I mean, yeah.
And dude, some of the worst. I used to drive home from that place with my elbow tendonitis throbbing so bad that I was nauseous. Yeah. And I was just like, dude, I thought this was going to be easy money. This is gnarly, dude.
Yeah, it gives you a respect for what a human being can do, whether they're trained or not, or particularly physically imposing or not. Just the amount of force that they can generate when they're afraid or motivated, or angry. Yeah, it's a lot.
Were you in it was called the Boar's Head Bar? You remember that?
Yeah, where the guy kept trying to do a double leg on you.
Yes. Oh my! You were in there, and Tally was like this. Tally was another guy that was part of the trainers that was partaking in the fight for life against students, and they would allow the other people in there that weren't actively involved in the fight for life to like go in and be hecklers because it was a bar scene, right? Yeah. You're going into a bar and I think you have to remove someone on trespass or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you're like, fuck you, I'm not going anywhere. And then they put their hands on you and then you attack them. Yeah. Right. And so how it's supposed to work. Obviously, if we just wanted to beat people to death, they would have a 0% chance of winning. Right. But you take them down and you're not hurting them, but just throwing little shots, just letting them know you're in a fight.
Yeah.
If they start to do things that they were taught, we're supposed to respect it, right? Because like, dude, if I have you mounted, you're not going to shrimp back to guard on a black belt.
Right.
That's never going to happen. Yeah. But if you start pushing on my knee and trying to pull your bottom leg through, all right, he's listening to the techniques that we taught him. Let's allow him to get his guard back.
Yeah.
Now from his guard, if he tries to create distance and stand up, we're supposed to allow that. So we're building patterns of that. If you implement the techniques you were trained, you're going to find success in it. But once you get back, dude, if you just had a black belt on top of you, mounted, getting your ass beat, and you get back to your feet, you probably want to transition to a tool as opposed to trying to shoot a double leg takedown. This kid, Tally would say every time we'd separate, he's like, shoot in, get him, take that fucking pig down, How many times did that kid do that to me?
Oh my God, like 6 times. And I'm finally on the 6th time, I'm like, yeah, maybe it'll work this time. He was not trained, so it's not like he was a good wrestler trying to use the tool. Like, he was just like, he'd get 15 feet and be like, well, I don't know. I just fought for my life. I just got Greg off of me for 7 minutes. Let me shoot in and do a toe. Like, I'm sitting there going like, what are we doing, man?
And bro, you know what's funny is that kid pulled me aside later that afternoon and he goes, hey man, I just want to thank you. That's the first real fist fight that I've ever been in. I said, wow. I said, bro, not to take away from that training evolution, but that wasn't a real fist fight.
Yeah.
We were still training, bro.
Yeah. I love that when people are like, yeah, that's the first time I've ever been punched. Because I used to do a lot more of the striking scenes, and I'd be like, yeah, well, I mean, that was with 16-ounce gloves on in a training scenario, so you may want to box some more. But yeah.
Well, my academy experience was down in Arizona, but they did similar type setups, and one of the things they do is they'd line recruits up, they try to pair them up based on size, and then you'd be on your knees with gloves on. And you'd start the training evolution with like a 50-yard sprint out and back, and then as many push-ups until they thought you looked tired, and then they'd say go, and you got on your knees and tried to take the other recruit's head off. But at that point, like you're already winded, your arms are already tired, and you're on your knees. You're not generating that much force.
So you're fighting another recruit.
Yeah,
though. Man,
that was week. That was week 1. But
that's good, man. Yeah. That's good if you're cadre.
Yeah. But there were so many people like, man, that was the first fight I've ever been in. This was eye-opening. You're like, well, I mean, it's not nothing, but it's also not a fight.
Yeah. No, it's not even close.
Yeah.
Because even, dude, even when I was doing MMA and you're doing like FT training with Charlie Pearson, and it's like you're getting your ass beat, but they're always, even though like on a physiological level, even in jiu-jitsu, your body feels like it's in a fight, right? You know how you get those like those emotions and the anxiety around it and whatnot. But on a conscious level, you still know this is a training evolution.
I'm still safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, I got in a fight in an alley in Kirkland one time and it was fucking pitch black out and it's just me and some dude. You know what I mean? It's like, where's that going to go?
Yeah.
It's a very, very different thing, you know, which is an interesting thing to segue into police, because I wanted to talk to you guys about police training. And that's one thing when I was a cop, I used to say to cops all the time. I'm like, I would say this. I would say, does Conor McGregor train 2 days a year? Who here, during DT training, right? Who here thinks Conor McGregor trains 2 days a year before a championship fight in the UFC? And everybody laughs because, oh, that's a stupid thing to say. He's a pro fighter. He trains every day, right? And I said, but here's the ironic thing. Everybody in this room, you're only willing to train 2 days a year, but the stakes in your fights are 10 times what they are in his fights, because he has sanctions. He has a sanctioned rule set. He has a referee, and he has the ability to quit at any time when he feels like it's outside of his capacity or it's becoming unsafe. You're not awarded any of those things.
Right.
Yeah.
And you still don't want to train more than 2 days a year. And then the next thing, and I'm sure both of you guys have seen this, they want to complain about shrimping. Cops hate shrimping. Have you, right? Have you?
Yeah.
Cops hate shrimping. Yep. Well, why am I on the ground? Why would I be on the ground sliding around like a slug? And it's like, we're creating angles, but you don't understand it yet. So you're just going to hate on it. What do you think it is about cops being averse to training?
Well, I think a big part of it is the fear of judgment, right? Like there's a mindset inside a lot of police cultures that you get brought up in like the FTO environment, right? So you're just constantly being evaluated and given feedback, and you're kind of feeling like you're always on the line of if you're going to make it or not, as opposed to getting instruction and really being trained, because evaluating and training are fundamentally different things.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, police training, whether it's defensive tactics or firearms, it's viewed from viewed from a context of evaluating. So you're getting feedback on if you're meeting standards or not, as opposed to being taught that it's okay to make mistakes in training. In fact, this is where you have to make them so you can learn how to do this differently out in the real world.
Yeah. You see that in firearms too. Yeah. Like how many, at least with the agencies I've been a part of, more often than not, our range days are more just about getting a qual on paper.
Yeah.
And just like you said, that's not training.
Right.
That's an administrative function to have that documentation. In the case you get in a shooting, they can say, hey, look, my officer is proficient and here's why. But that's not really building much.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, you look at training, like when you or me used to go down in the academy, we weren't instructors, because we didn't have the certificate to instruct.
Yeah.
And so lots of agencies, they will send someone who maybe has no experience to a 40-hour, 1 week course. You come back and you're now an instructor.
I know.
So you're and to me, that's why with our instructors, like I refuse to do that. I told them, you've got to train at least for a year before I'm going to pay money for you to instruct somewhere. And then they come back and, well, will the department pay for it? I'm like, no, you should. That's part of being a professional is you should, it's for my family. It's for me that's the reason I train. But yeah, I mean, I think they're afraid to look dumb in front of other people, especially non-cops too. Like, cause as a cop, 90% of our interactions, I'm in charge. No one questions me about it. I tell you to get out of your car, you get out of your car. I tell you to stop, you stop. And so we get this idea that,
people are going to listen to me.
People are going to listen. I'm in charge. I'm the man. Then you come to jiu-jitsu and you realize like, oh, that straight arm bar I learned in basic academy doesn't seem to work. Maybe I'm not as confident as I thought I was going to be. And I think people have a hard time swallowing that, that identity.
What's strange for me is that I always considered if I put my hands on you, we are grappling, right? Even compliant cuffing. if I have control of your arm and I'm manipulating you in a way to where I can efficiently take away your freedom, I always looked at that as grappling. There's different levels of grappling, obviously, but to put yourself in that situation, and I mean, I was at the port, so I wasn't making half the arrests that your guys' agencies are making, probably not even a tenth, right? But still, if I'm going to take people's freedom away and put them in handcuffs and not know how to control and manipulate a human body, I would be afraid to go. Like if you just somehow, the little Men in Black wand that just like wipes your memory, if someone took all my jiu-jitsu from me and was like, hey, you're going on patrol tomorrow, I think I'd be afraid. Like, dude, I don't know how to fight, and I might be put in a situation where I have to fight. Like, to me, that feels scary.
Yeah.
But most cops are content there.
So
I don't know if most, but a lot.
Yeah. And part of it too is there is so much mandatory training that we have to do too, that to me, it should prioritize life and livelihood. So any training we do should be to protect your life or to protect your, make sure that you're confident that you're not going to get sued and lose your home and lose your job, and that's the livelihood. But I mean, like you talk about it, I remember when I first started, every year we had to do training on fire extinguishers. Now, granted, that's only an hour PowerPoint, but how much has fire extinguisher technology changed for 30 years?
Bro, if you can't just pull it off the wall and pull the pin.
Yeah.
But that's all CYA stuff too.
Yep.
Exactly.
Exactly.
How do you put a fire out in a trash can? Now it's all like online PowerPoints. At least at the port, dude, your online continuous training, you log in and there's 40 new blocks of instructions, it seems like, every fucking month.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as actual grappling goes, you're a chief now. And I don't know if that means you have the autonomy to be able to do as much as I would think like a police chief can do. But what do you think the right answer is?
So I think the right answer, what we're exploring is we're paying for 3 of our instructors to do a year jiu-jitsu at one of the local academies within our city. And then part of it too is rather than necessarily trying to have, even after a year, I can't expect to have, an instructor with a knowledge base that, you would have and so part of it too is trying to figure out, all right, well, what about if I design the lesson plan or the instructor designs the lesson plan, but you don't necessarily need to teach it. And so then we brought in like Daniel to come in for one of the seminars, and he taught for 2 8-hour days with it, which we got good feedback on. But I think it's that combination of making training fun, but also realistic enough too. How do we teach shrimping so that people, one, understand, have that oh shit moment, which I think you need in training in a profession like ours, that moment of, man, that was fun, but if that was real life, I'd probably be dead.
Yeah.
They've got to have that realization that, you just died. Luckily, this was training. I don't think in a shoot house or sim house, you never forget that going through the door and getting shot in the face. Like, you kind of joke about it, but there's also part of your brain that goes, yeah, I'm dead. I'm dead right now.
Yeah.
So to be honest, what I don't know is I still have not found the answer of how do you explain the importance to officers still. What I hate is I hear the excuse all the time, I just don't have time. I don't have time. None of us have more time. I wasn't given 27 hours a day, but I prioritized.
Bro, say, when they tell you don't have time, say, hand me your iPhone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's open your screen time.
I mean, the reality of it too is that when you look at the profession of like policing that people are electing to get inside of, there's no excuse for not prioritizing things like your fitness, like your ability to grapple, your firearms. Because the reality is that although you don't have to do those things every day, and you may even go a career without having to do them, if you don't train them, if you're not proficient in them, you're a liability to your partners and to your community and to your own family. I mean, it's one of those things where there's difficulties in time, and there's administrative realities to the agencies figuring out how to put on this kind of training. But if you, as the individual officer, takes accountability for, well, what do I really need to be prepared for? Because when you go to work, you should expect contact.
100%.
And the reality is that these are two things that I got from SWAT training, but expect contact and bad tactics always win unopposed. So no matter how many times you go out and you train something poorly or use some tactic that isn't really that effective, but nobody gives you any feedback, well, you're going to continue to win.
Yeah.
But the reality is that there's people out there that they are absolutely going to fight back. And
Dude,
some of them are skilled practitioners. You have to be ready to deal with that.
I like that expect contact mentality. Something that was taught to me as a young ranger, going back to the shoot house, is like when you enter a room and clear your sector,
Yeah.
every single corner that you dig into, you tell yourself the bad guy's going to be here.
Yep.
This is the corner he's going to be in.
When I used to run shoot house training, it'd be one of the things we'd look for is if people rounded corners and their eyes went wide when somebody was there.
Then you're surprised.
Yeah, and it meant that we were going to find ways to help you fix that.
Yeah.
Put people in your corners more often.
Because, bro, I don't care who you are, Army Ranger, SWAT, Navy SEAL,
Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
Yep.
You can get surprised
Yeah.
when you're not expecting something. And now we talk about the initiative on the mats all the time. The initiative just shifted.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
You don't want to be, oh, fuck, going into a gunfight.
Yep.
You know? And so it's like dig every corner knowing this is where he's at.
Yep.
And you dig it. I'm going to get him. Oh, fuck, he's not here. Next corner, right? Expecting contact.
It's a conscious mindset that people can say that they live it, but it's really something that you turn on. And when you go to work, you should turn that on.
Yeah. And bro, and I'm a realist too. Like I'm not one of those guys that's like, I'll wait for a corner booth so I can face the door when I'm getting pizza with the girls. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I have to live. I like to articulate it as I live in the realm of probability, not in the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
Because you start living in the realm of possibility. I mean, there could be a fucking tiger in that fridge when you clear this room.
Yeah.
You didn't clear the fridge and out comes this tiger and it eats your squad.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But if you live in probability is not living in a place of fear. It's just living in a place of these are the things that could potentially happen. And it's more important for cops because, dude, what's the officer down page?
Yeah.
I mean, watch the officer down page for 1 week.
Yeah.
And then talk to me about probability.
Yeah.
You know?
And kind of like what Mark's talked about, a liability for not only your partners, your agency, but also the community. I mean, we had a conversation years ago about justified but preventable shootings, you know, and now with the day and age of body-worn cameras, it's just there's so many examples of where you see a body-worn camera of a shooting that maybe was justified, but it was
Not necessary.
not necessary.
Yeah.
It was kind of fear-induced. I mean, it's an old stat. Maybe it's still true, but years ago, Force Science showed that 70% of shootings happen immediately after a less lethal application.
Oh, yep.
So, like, they shot a taser, and the taser didn't work, and all of a sudden the cop's going, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
Or, you know, stuff like that, where you look at it and you go, man, this over-reliance on tools, which don't always work. But, you know, I was talking with Tyler the other day. The funny thing about learning how to fight is you want to fight less. Like, I am so much more calm and relaxed when I'm out there because I'm like, man, I never know which guy is that jiu-jitsu or wrestling phenom. You know, I've been tricked enough times that I'm like, man, if I can talk to someone, that's what I want to do. But you also have the confidence to where you're also not avoiding it.
That's
too.
right, dude. It shows and people see it and they feel it. And it's just like monkey brain shit. You can look into a man's eyes and see if he's fucking down or if he's intimidated. And you can't be the intimidated one as a law enforcement officer.
When I was on patrol training people, it would always shock them. But like when you'd have a warrant, I would just ask people like, hey, you got a warrant. I'm going to have you step out of your car. Are you going to fight me? Like, and people would be like, what? But I mean, it's like, I just want to know.
Yeah.
Like, are you planning on running away or fighting me?
Maybe they'll tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but you watch their OODA loop where all of a sudden they go like, what? No. Like, okay, cool. Shouldn't have any problems then. But I mean, it's that, okay, if you say yes, well, thank you for at least giving me a heads up. Like,
dude, I won't tell the whole story because I've told it on the podcast a lot, but I had the very similar scenario where it was just a trespass case. I told Marcus this last week. His ears were bigger than mine, right?
yeah.
And if you're paying attention and you understand what cauliflower ear is, And every police officer listening, if you don't understand what cauliflower ears are, go Google it and get a good understanding. Because that's the biggest pre-assault indicator that I need to find. But he had blown out ears, and he was doing all the pre-assault indicators, clenching his fists, and like you could just see it in him, right? And that's exactly what I said. I said, bro, if you want to fight, let's fight. I like fighting. I can see your ears. I can see that you like fighting. You can see mine. You can see that I like fighting. So I'm going to put the ball in your court. If we want to fight, we want to fight. If you want to fight, let's do it. If you don't, then I'll be cool as fuck to you. It's up to you.
Yeah.
And he was instantly just like, fuck yeah, man. Like I've never had a cop talk to me like that.
Yeah.
Like they like that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
One of the biggest impacts of good training is the confidence it instills in the person that's using it, though. Because if you look at any engagement, whether it be grappling, fighting, police engagements, shooting, your confidence in your ability to succeed is directly proportional to actually doing it. And so as you train, you become more proficient in a skill, but you also become so much more confident in actually applying it. And so then when you choose to utilize it, it tends to be more appropriate. You're far more calm and able to make decisions and think. Because like we know on the mats, if you turn off your brain and you don't think at all, you're much easier to defeat. If you're actually thinking through and solving the problem that the other person is presenting, you can become very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And in the police world, it's the same thing. If you're just fearfully reacting, then there may be a lot of off-ramps that you're missing, or abilities to utilize a certain technique or tool or tactic that solves this problem before it really escalates. And so your confidence in its application, your ability to think through the problem, and then pace your output. Like instead of just going 1,000%, layering through all of your stamina and being literally utterly exhausted within 20 seconds, you can more appropriately utilize your energy.
I mean, energy management is one of the biggest things we learn out there.
Yeah,
because we're fighting for 6 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I always say a 6 minute round is a 1 mile run. You can't do your 1 mile run at your 40-yard dash pace. Right. You just can't do it, right?
Yeah.
But a 1 mile run at 6 minutes, you're still getting down, right? You're still pushing yourself. You're in the fight. You're working, but you're back down enough to where it's sustainable for 6 minutes. I think a fight needs to be that.
Yeah.
I had a deputy from Kalispell Sheriff's Office do the podcast. He's a black belt now. And he got, in Montana, like backup is 40 minutes out sometimes. Yeah. And he was in some fucking middle of nowhere traffic stop. The dude started fighting him, and they fought out in a snowy field for 30 minutes.
Wow.
Man. Yeah.
And he didn't know how to fight.
Wow.
And he's like, from that day forward, it was jiu-jitsu every day.
Yeah, I bet.
And he's a black belt now.
Yeah.
And he's like, it took that kind of eye-opening experience, because it's like, dude, if this guy wins, he will take my gun and I will die.
Yeah.
That's where this was going.
Yeah.
Here's one of the cool things about body cameras these days, because whether there's people that view them differently, but regardless of how you think about them, the amount of videos that we are seeing now of officers in those kind of situations, because before it used to be like, well, what happened to you, or what happened to somebody that you knew firsthand? Otherwise, there's just stories.
Yeah,
but
it just gets kind of convoluted.
Yeah, now we can see firsthand what's happening out and about, what officers are really running into, and what do you need to be prepared to handle. And so in a lot of ways, it's getting rid of the ability for officers to be complacent about what their job really could entail. Granted, it's not every day, but when you see some of those videos and you realize, like, yeah, that could be me. That could be the person I contact next. It gives a much more real sense to the professionalism you need to have in your training.
Well, and wouldn't you agree, in the profession of a patrol cop, it's not if, it's when.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It's not if, it's when.
Yeah, you have two options. You either avoid contact, which might work, and unfortunately some officers, you do see that's the route they take. They're not doing the social contacts, they're not doing the traffic stops, but at a certain point you are going to get dispatched to something to where you're going to have to engage. But what drives me insane are the proactive young cops. Right out of the FTO, they're doing every traffic stop they can, they're contacting. It's a numbers game. The more contacts you have, the more likelihood that you are going to have one of these contacts that's not going to go the way you plan.
Do you like your young cops being super proactive and going out? Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I tell every single one of them, like, you need to train. whether it's jujitsu. To me, I don't really care what you pick as long as you're picking something.
Yeah. I mean, we're biased to
Yeah,
jiu-jitsu,
yeah.
but if you're a badass kickboxer, if you're a badass wrestler, if you're a badass judoka, it's going to serve you in the way you need it to serve you.
And I think once you get started, that's the key. Whether you start with jiu-jitsu or kickboxing or whatever, once you dip your toe in it, going like, oh man, that's pretty cool. And then you'll have the same thing. You'll feel great about your stand. Like I was an awesome. I felt pretty confident stand-up. Then I went to an MMA gym down in Vancouver. I got taken down like 9 times in a row, and I was like, I don't know how to stop this. I don't know how to stop this guy from grabbing a hold of me and taking me down. And so then I started looking into jiu-jitsu and wrestling and other stuff. So
one of the things that it really teaches people is that failing or losing isn't a bad thing in training. That's really the only way you're going to get better. Because if you just roll with people that you beat up on, you could get marginally better. But it's when you roll with people that are better than you, that are showing you where your weaknesses are, where your technique is failing, where your fitness is failing. That's how you figure out how to get better. And it's the same mindset that you can then go back to and apply to the police profession. And it's something I wish police leaders demonstrated more frequently, was the willingness to show their officers that they're not perfect, that they make mistakes, because all their officers know that. They all see it. But the willingness to acknowledge it and then teach people lessons from them so that everybody is getting better. And when you do things like jiu-jitsu or any other martial art, you kind of inherently learn that lesson. But it's something that can be applied to every aspect of policing.
Well, bro, it's like our rash guard says, the mats never lie.
Yeah.
As Joe Rogan puts it, you can't be full of shit on the mats, right? And once you learn how to live your life in a manner that you can't be full of shit in, it carries over to all the other aspects of your life.
Yeah.
What are your guys' thoughts on less than lethal? I'm curious because I have my thoughts.
I think it has a time and a place. What I don't like is that there's this over-reliance on it.
Mm-hmm.
Where when it comes down to it, doesn't matter if I'm using a bolo wrap or taser, at a certain point, my hands still have got to touch you, and so what you see is the training's getting better, but for years what you would see is you would be non-compliant but not aggressive. And there would be this, I tase you, you don't do what I say, so now what do? I tase you again. I tase you. And you'd watch these videos going, hey, there's 4 of you. At a certain point, someone just needs to go hands-on and take control of it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it used to be like, hey, get on the ground. He's not doing it. Tase him, right?
Yeah.
Now it has to be like actively showing aggression, right? Like if someone's walking away.
Active resistance.
And
an immediate threat.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's got to be some sort of a threat. So if I say, hey, you're under arrest and you just walk away, I can't just tase you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't know, man. Like one thing that used to frustrate me, and here's the thing is a lot of people think like, oh, I must fucking hate the port. Like, dude, when I worked for the port, it was actually a pretty smooth agency. Like coming from the U.S. Marshal Service, which is just a clusterfuck, man. Yeah. Like the feds, everybody thinks the feds are like the tip of the spear. In my experience, it was the complete opposite. A local department seemed to have their shit wired tight so much more than I saw within the federal agencies. But still, the port, I forget, it was either 2 or 3 less than lethals. And it's like, fuck, my kid's already 37 pounds. And my less than lethal is jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to tell people all the time, I was like, take your baton out and fight me. And you'll die 10 out of 10 times. Because that's not a baton. If I put a weapon in your hand, like what was Rich Lee? Remember him?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to fight him with a baton.
Yeah.
Because he does that collie.
Yeah.
And he was good at that shit, right? But if you want your baton to be your go-to and you're not taking collie lessons or you're not going upstairs and hitting the heavy bag with it sometimes,
yeah,
it's not going to work, And the same thing, it's like everybody, you know how many people I tased in 10 years in law enforcement? 0.
So I tased one person, foot chase on the train tracks, middle of the night. I realized that, I'm like, boy, this kid's in better shape than me because I'm not catching. He trips. He turns around, gets in a wrestler stance, and has state champion wrestling sweatshirt on. And I just, without even thinking, I go, pop. I'm like,
You should have done the Jorge Masvidal flying knee.
yeah. I'm like, I'm not getting taken down with
On
a double
train-
leg on train
on train
tracks.
tracks.
I'm like, I'm swallowing my pride here. Yeah.
That's funny, dude. But it goes back to what you're saying, bro. You never know who trains now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like you go, when I trained at Charlie's at an MMA gym is very similar to like when I was in the military, where you go through boot camp with 30 guys in your platoon, and then you get your first weekend off, and everybody goes and gets their civilians out of the closet. And this dude's like, wait, you're a cowboy? You wear a big old belt buckle and a hat?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, you're a gangster? Why you sag your pants? Like, what the fuck's going? Because we don't know each other outside of our military uniform.
Yeah.
And I remember like when we would do MMA, we'd be wearing fucking just a pair of shorts usually, not even a shirt or a rash guard, you know? And then one night we all went out to dinner together. Dude, let's go get dinner as a team after practice. And it was the same thing. A couple of the dudes put on their like fucking gangster looking attire, and we had some hicks and some grungers. And I'm just like, oh, we're like a fucking motley crew of who's who, man.
Yeah.
You know? But it's only gotten worse or better, however you want to look at it. But it doesn't matter what your like cultural background is or your like socioeconomic status. Like people of all walks of life are gravitating towards training.
Yeah.
And that's look at the fucking mat room on any given night. Same thing. It's the who's who of like, what the fuck, dude? You know?
And what I think makes jiu-jitsu so tough is for the most part, I can look at someone and say like, probably a wrestler. They walk different or a boxer or something. Like you can jiu-jitsu though is tough. I mean, there's a couple guys where if they didn't have cauliflower ear, I would pick a fight with Scott Stillwell 10 out of 10 times. And I would get murdered. You know, there's certain people where you're like, oh yeah, I would totally no issue.
Well, bro, that's why I always reference Hayden on the podcast because he's a 16-year-old kid that's in Robot Club and smart as fuck. And you wouldn't think he's a fighter, and he is, bro.
I am trying to just condition him so that in his mind he can never beat me because I probably have one more year left. Like Hayden, yeah.
And I mean, that fucker choked me to sleep when he was 15. You know?
Yeah.
It's fucking, it's radical, dude. But for me, like the less than lethal, it seems like you said, people want to rely on it.
Yep.
And that's their like little ace in the hole. And it's like, dude, you're looking at it all backwards. Like that's a tool for a very specific circumstance. But outside of that, like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen tasers fail 100 times hitting coats and belt buckles and stuff. And it's like, if that was your, all right, I got you. Now what? And that's gonna instill panic, right?
And I mean, not even less lethal. I see an over reliance on firearms too, in the sense of you know, during these DT trainings, you'll hear people be like, "Well, I'd pull up my gun, like, okay, let's try it," and then I'll mount them, and then they realize pulling out a gun while someone's mounting you is a lot harder than it seemed in your head.
Or bro, if you're being out grappled by somebody, do you want to now interject a firearm into a scenario with a superior grappler?
Yep, like you
doesn't make much fucking sense.
You're on the ground for a reason, and it probably wasn't your choice. So things have not gone your way.
So you don't teach your recruits to pull guard and shoot triangles and omoplatas?
No. Yeah.
Do you guys see we got 2 new young cops that just joined the team?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And one of them came in and he goes, "Hey man, I listened to your podcast and you said if you're a police officer and you don't train, you're wrong." And he goes, "I got hired today. So now that I'm technically a police officer, here I am." And he's tough as shit, man.
That's awesome.
He's going to be a good addition to this team. Yeah. And then we got another guy that's been on about 2 years, but very similar mindset.
Yeah.
But talking to them, and they're brand new cops too, right?
Yep.
They're like, yeah, man, it just doesn't seem like anybody at the departments we're at really cares about wanting to train, you know? And one of them's like, I think they're both in their like early 20s, 22, 23. You know, you got this new motivated kid. Hey, you want to train? And everybody's telling them, nope. And I told him, I was like, don't ever allow yourself to get disgruntled because it's not your job to motivate them. It's your job to motivate yourself. And you're here every night.
Well, shame is a powerful motivator. So they should hold on to it. And then they can shame the people around them.
Bro, I say all the time, fat shaming. People say fat shaming is like this fucking terrible thing. Dude, if I left for a couple months for whatever and came back and you had like a big old gut,
oh man,
you better fucking believe them. Marcus, what the fuck, dude?
Yep.
You know, that's what we should be doing. If you're letting yourself slip and you're dropping below the standards and you're actively becoming a diminished version of yourself, people should want to have your people that actually love you will have a conversation with you.
My wife the other day says, I actually kind of like the dad bod you're getting. Very next day, I'm like, all right, intermittent fasting. We're done drinking. We're
bro. So I don't know if you guys saw, I posted pre-surgery versus post-surgery picture, and it was literally not post-surgery, last week, right? Yeah. So that's pre-surgery versus last week.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, I was such a stud 2.5 months ago. And Will's wife, Crystal, looks at it and goes, oh my God, you have gotten fat. What the fuck? Man. And I was like, that's it.
Yep.
That's all I needed to hear.
What you need.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. About those two officers not getting a lot of good feedback from their co-officers with training. I think one of the things that's so important for them and for all of us is to look at our communities, and for them, maybe their law enforcement agency, and take ownership of the culture that's there. And although you can't immediately change it, by staying disciplined and consistent over time, people are going to gravitate to that kind of mindset, to staying dialed into your own growth, trying to be excellent at what it is you do, having not just like, this is my job, but treating it like a profession. Like I really care about the nuances of my craft, and I'm going to focus on how I improve them incrementally over time. And there's no way about it, other people are going to be drawn to that. And as you move up in your agency, and whether that's just because you become more experienced and you get some specialty roles, or you actually promote into formal leadership positions, you slowly but surely craft a culture that weeds out people that don't want to be a part of that. Yeah. Because policing demands it. You have to be diligent and focused on becoming better, because the next call is the most important call. What happened yesterday, you don't survive your career because you were great yesterday, because of all the amazing decisions you made. Our job is way too dynamic. There's way too much liability to not be constantly striving to be better for the next call you're on, because it may be the one that's going to determine what happens if your life ends, if somebody else's does, and the standard that your life is going to have going forward. Because if you get, sued into poverty because you made some critical mistake that your training could have helped you prevent, man, the only person whose fault that is yours.
And I think that the key word that, Marcus was talking about was thinking about yourself as a professional. I always tell people that this profession is super easy to be okay at, but extremely hard to be excellent at. I mean,
I like that. There's
so much.
That's applicable to a lot of things.
Yeah. There's so much nuance. And I think even when I got started 10 years ago, lots of law enforcement could.
Wait, you're a chief and you've only been on 10 years?
Oh my God, not by choice. Okay. Yeah. But there used to be this thing where you could almost get away with just being gritty.
Yeah.
I'm untrained, but I'm just gritty. Well, rightfully so. I think society demands more from us now, and it's our responsibility to answer that call, to treat our jobs like a profession. When I go for surgery, I don't want a surgeon that was like, oh yeah, I passed medical school 20 years ago. I'm like, okay, any updated training? Are you staying on top of stuff? Yeah. And we should be the same way. Laws are constantly changing, technology. But instead of looking at what changes with technology, look at what's not going to change. You need to learn how to talk to people. Yep. You need to learn how to read people. You're always going to be entering buildings, dealing with cars, dealing with people that don't want you there. And so building that skill set to be able to adapt to any of those circumstances, I think is critical, and part of being a professional officer, and then also professional, agency. One of the things we did at my agency is we have a minimum range score, which was way too low than what I thought. So we immediately increased it, but rather than it just being a test, being like, hey, if you score below below 400 on the range, our firearms guys are going to grab you. We're going to pay overtime, and we don't need to make it a big deal. Just discreetly, they're going to take you to the range. They're going to put in extra hours until you get dialed in, you know? Yep. And the same thing we notice that with DT, with physical fitness. You know, we have a fit for duty policy, yet we have nothing to hold people accountable for staying in shape.
I was going to ask what that looks like, because the agencies that I've worked in, physical fitness is only a standard for hiring. And then once you're on, it seems like there's literally nothing outside of maybe some incentives, but nothing to, like when I was a ranger, if you failed 2 PT tests in a row, you got kicked out. And I know we can't go to that standard. You can't have a special operations standard in a law enforcement agency, but it does seem like if it takes you 20 minutes to run a mile and I'm on the other side of the country teaching a course and my family needs help, I don't feel like that's fair for that person to be the person that shows up.
Yeah.
So what is how do you enforce a standard? Is it even possible?
So part where agencies run into issue is almost every single one of our agencies will have a policy that says, yeah, you need to be fit for duty, and a very vague term, but instead we need a standard that you can hold. So what we did is we created kind of a rubric that when we do defensive tactics training, we incorporate now.
Did you say a rubric?
Rubrics or rubric? I don't know.
I'll have to Google that.
Yeah, it's probably not even right.
It's a cheap word.
It's something you learn. But, you know, where we incorporate where they're doing a dummy pull, a sprint, and then we're actually evaluating, like, hey, man, you weren't able to do this within time. So now we have something to come back to 2 times, say, hey, we have something that we can point to for fit for duty, saying, hey, we need to do. But for me, a big part is not only holding people accountable, but also giving them the tools too. So
for sure.
So where we're also trying to work with, you know, some sports therapy places, some nutrition places, be like, how can you? Because I mean, the job is tough. There's a lot of stress and very little movement too. And so it's a perfect combination for people to gain weight, to have heart disease, because you're sitting in a car 90% of the time, stressed out.
Bro, when at the port, it's 12-hour shifts. And by the end of the shift, dude, I felt like I got my ass beat.
Yeah.
And I remember just coming home and be like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah, a 12-hour shift, especially a graveyard shift, stuck in a car with gear on,
yeah,
it's grueling.
It's
not that it's so physically difficult in like a workout context, but at the end of it, like you're tired and it wears on you.
Dude, I would go park my car. We had this place called the Radar Tower, which was on the backside of the airfield, pretty secluded, and it was like a one-way in and one-way out. And I would fucking go out there and do like a fucking 10-minute yoga routine, like 1 or 2 times a shift, because my back, everything just, and I realized like a lot of knee and back issues and shit that I thought were from jiu-jitsu, it wasn't from jiu-jitsu. It was from just being static in a car all fucking day.
Yeah.
You know?
A lot of agencies are starting to make changes where they're focused a little bit more on officers. Well, they call it wellness, but it ends up being their fitness and their longevity in it. And so you, like my agencies, it seems like we're right on the cusp of having paid time to work out on duty.
We had that. That's a good thing.
It's huge, especially when you work 12-hour shifts and you already don't have much time off on the days that you work. But the agencies that are able to, you know, put things into effect like Andy's, where they're evaluating people's fitness, like that's awesome. There's some agencies that are going to find that more difficult. And so then it comes down to officers creating that culture within their squads, within their districts, within the entire department. And it's building trust with each other. It's showing that like, hey, I care about you and I care about your family. So I'm going to help you find ways to stay fit. I'm going to demand that of you because, one, that's how you're going to help take care of me and help me get home to my family. It's how we're going to take care of our communities, and it's how I'm going to take care of you and your family and make sure that you get home. Mm-hmm. And that when you hopefully, you know, finish this career and retire at whatever point that is, you're not sick or broken or some emotional wreck because you didn't deal with all this stuff that we've had to deal with in a way that allowed you to process it and heal.
Yeah, because statistically you're going to be.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think, you know, before I was in this current position, I was actually on the union and the guild. And one of the funny things that was disheartening for me was sometimes we are our own worst enemies.
Yeah.
As an individual, every police officer would say, yeah, I want my partners to be in shape, mentally and physically fit for duty because my life depends on it, the community's lives. But then when it gets to, time to implement policies, or oftentimes it wouldn't be the administration or the city that's pushing back. It would be the officers themselves saying, no, we don't want to implement a physical fitness standard.
Because people don't want one more thing that they have to be held accountable to.
And what I think they forget sometimes is what's good for the herd isn't always good for the individual. So implementing a physical fitness standard as a profession, as a department, would greatly improve our profession.
Yeah.
But for certain individuals within organizations, it may be bad. And we lose sight of that. We're not doing stuff for Greg the officer or Marcus the officer. We're doing stuff as an organization and as a profession as a whole,
So you said you implement a physical fitness assessment, and then you have some tools to help people progress if they want to. Is that kind of where it ends, or do you have the capacity to be like, hey, you're just not cut out for this?
So that's kind of what we're working on. So I am very fortunate because we have a really great relationship with our union. But so we have the physical fitness kind of a skills assessment during defensive tactics, and then each year every person in the department, myself included, has to work 40 hours of patrol. So that's something I just implemented. So now this gives me something to where I can say, man, you're failing at, these skill sets in defensive tactics. Then we did 40 hours on the road. You weren't able to, talking to other people. You're struggling with these basic skill sets that's part of your job description. So then that gives me the ability to start saying, okay, how do we do a performance enhancement plan? And that now frees up some money, some funds for me to say, let's start taking you to, let's look at a sports nutritionist. We allow workouts on duty, and I highly encourage it. Officers always say, well, I got this case. I got Einstein used to say, by wasting hours, I'm saving years. And he would go for a 2-hour walk every single day. And that's what would refresh his, work ethic, his energy levels. And so the same thing, encouraging officers, just take a break and take a 1-hour break. You're going to come back and you're going to get way more work done than, kind of like your yoga routine. You probably got done from that and then you felt way better rather than, had you just stayed in your car. But
one of the things I love that you're doing, Andy, though, is having everybody in your agency go back and work patrol. Because you hear it all the time in agencies that patrol is the foundation of all departments. And if there were budget cuts or whatever the case may be, the last thing that they would want to impact is patrol. It would be the thing that still remains when everything else has gone away. And so I think that as long as you are involved in this profession in all capacities, whether it's in a specialty, in detectives, in leadership, all the way up to chief, you should maintain the ability to be a patrol officer and what that demands of you. Because you're setting the example, you're setting the standard. And at the end of the day, you may have to actually go back and do that kind of work. And when our leaders no longer appear like they could be patrol officers, then it lets the standards diminish. And it lets people think that it's acceptable to, I could go back in detectives for 10 years and sure, I could never run again, but I'm a great detective, so I'm of value. And there's some truth to that level of experience is still valuable. But it would be far better for that individual and for the agency if they maintained their physical fitness and their capabilities throughout it.
And I think understanding that, kind of like how the feds do it, the standard will change. I'm not going to expect a 54-year-old to run at the same speed a 22-year-old.
Yeah.
Right. But there should still be minimums that, this is still the job. When I call 911, I don't get to choose, hey, I want a 22-year-old to show up.
No, and that's the thing, man. And that's why I tell people all the time, if you are that 54-year-old that's like, oh, I'm knocking out my top 5 and then I got however much time left to retire, okay, all that's good, but again, if my family needs you, are you capable? And if you're not, it's not a knock on you. It's like Lappin always says, dude, go sell insurance and make more money than being a cop.
Yeah. Well, and you never know when you're going to be the one that is that a call. I mean, you hear stories of it. You see it on body cameras where, there was a chief that was the first person. They happened to be driving home and this call kicked out. And so they're the backing officer. It's like, well, then you have to be capable of really doing that. And that means all the things, right? Like the decision making, the ability to get into, grappling, into fighting, into use of force, still being a professional at those, even though that's not your day in, day out task.
What do you think? You've referenced it several times. You said one of the biggest things is the ability to talk to people. What do you recommend to young officers that feel like they're lacking in that skill set?
I think the biggest thing is try and forget that you're a cop. I think lots of times new officers will go through the academy and they're so focused on professionalism that they come off robotic.
Yeah.
We've all probably had a traffic stop where we've had an officer at our driver's side window, and you're thinking, going like, man, come on, this guy has no empathy. Remember that,
Or he's even being a dick for like no reason.
yeah. And
Which
so,
then is like, that's the worst, because then that paints the whole that person's day as fuck police officers.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I always try and remind officers that, where someone is in life isn't who they are in life. We've all had struggles. I've had my own demons that I fought. I've had issues. And same thing with people that we're dealing with on the road. And so trying to, as much as possible, like, forget that you are a police officer, and instead just talk to them. Hey, if I were to just run into Marcus on the road, how would I interact with him? It probably wouldn't be, sir, ma'am. It would be, I usually ask people like, hey, what's your name? Do you mind if I call you Marcus? Cool.
Yeah.
Hey, Marcus, I'm Andy.
See, bro, we're the same. I used to say that all the time. On traffic stops, I'd introduce myself on a first name basis.
Yeah.
Hey, my name's Greg. I work for the Port of Seattle. The reason I stopped you, just literally, and it's probably almost on a subconscious level, but bringing them down, like bringing yourself down to an equal playing field with them.
Yep. Exactly.
It's because, bro, if you want to try and posture your authority, real motherfuckers see right through that.
Yep.
So what you're actually doing is diminishing your authority.
Yeah.
I think one of the important things for officers to do too, that can really help in how they communicate with people, because absolutely, like, treating people like humans, like having some real interaction is great. But really being willing to take an interest into the individual that you're dealing with in that moment. Because at the end of the day, right, like, we're going to hold people accountable for, the law enforcement side, right? Justice. But you also want to be able to enact change. And if you're not willing to actually look at a person and be interested in them and in what their continuing process is going to be, it's really hard to have a level of connection. And there's a lot of things in law enforcement that make that more difficult, right? Like, we have calls are stacking up. You've got another call, and you'll get countless examples of spending a lot of time working with somebody and only to have the call tomorrow be with them for the exact same problem. But none of that matters. You still have to be willing to show up and be actually invested in the outcome. And then you'll find ways to connect with people better. You'll release some of the time constraints that maybe are self-imposed and not created by whatever it is that you're actually dealing with, and really have some empathy and connect with people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things was, say, after someone was under arrest, and just driving to jail and just talking to them, like,
Bro, it's some of my favorite conversations ever.
Because one, you realize how fortunate you are. Like, man, maybe one thing could have been different in my life, and that our places could be switched. Because there's a certain, part of it was luck. I was lucky. I was born to,
good parents,
two parents who
stable family.
stayed together,
Yeah.
stable family. I didn't get addicted to drugs, but it's amazing when you talk to people and you're like, hey, what happened? I got into a bad car wreck. And you sit there and go like, man, that could have been me,
Bro. And it's mind boggling, even though you hear that story over and over, because there's like a spectrum of what meth has done to people. On this side of the spectrum, they can communicate like we can communicate right now. Yeah. It's like you're addicted to drugs, but your brain still works at 100%. And then the far end of the spectrum is like straight zombie.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like nobody's home. It's just a heartbeat and your lungs are pumping air, but that's about it. And I remember I arrested this one girl on a warrant, and dude, she was smart and articulate. Like, I could just tell her brain was firing at basically 100%, even though she was addicted to methamphetamine, right?
Yeah.
And and again, driving to jail. I was driving her to SCORE, and I was like, I just got to say, like, I arrest people a lot that are addicted to methamphetamine. You seem like the most normal person that I've ever had in the back of my car. And she goes, I'm married with 3 kids. My husband is an engineer for Boeing. Like, painted this perfect life that she had, and then had some type of surgery, got addicted to narcotics.
Damn.
Once the narcotic prescription ran out, she's like, dude, I turned to street drugs because I couldn't stop. And then my husband threw me out. So I have a husband and 3 kids at home, blah, blah, blah. Like, painting the picture perfectly for me.
Yeah.
And then you know what she says next? Like, this is a normal housewife whose husband like had this normal life. And she goes, I'll tell you what, because now we're talking, so she feels comfortable with me, right? She goes, if you want to pull over, I will literally let you do anything you want to me if you'll not put me in jail today.
Wow.
Yeah. We're gonna pull over and fuck in the back of my squad car before I take you to SCORE, right? But hey, that's her Hail Mary.
Yeah.
But think about how dark that is, bro.
Yeah.
This mother of 3 that was living a normal life is now offering to sleep with a random cop to avoid jail because that's how addicted to methamphetamine she is. And bro, that's fucking sad.
Yeah.
That is
terrible.
fucking sad, man. And I think that's one thing that really is troublesome for me. And this isn't even necessarily part of the law enforcement profession, but we just get a front row seat.
Yeah.
Like, how long have you been in Washington now, Marcus?
8 years.
Okay,
8
so
years.
you've got a front row seat to the decline.
Yeah.
It might not be as bad in your guys' jurisdictions as if you get down south into Seattle and whatnot, but we've still seen addiction pretty much be the driving force between the majority of our calls for service.
Yeah.
Is that the case in your guys' jurisdictions too?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's so much car prowls and petty theft, and everything is revolving around heroin and methamphetamine. And we're just kicking the can down the street, and we're not helping these people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I could just lay out some comprehensive plan right now to like fix the problem, but I do think that we need to have mandatory treatment, and we need to get these fucking people off the streets, because this is the misconception, and you guys know this. There is an element of society that wants to act like letting these people do what they need to do and sleep on the fucking roads and piss in alleys and stuff. We're tolerating them because it's showing that we actually, as humanity, we care about people, and we're not going to lock people up for being addicts. And it's like, you guys obviously haven't been in the drug world or interacted with it much, because those people are in a living hell.
Right.
They're in how many people have you arrested whose pants are full of their own shit?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. You know, you wouldn't allow an animal to be in the conditions that we're allowing people to be in. What's that say about us?
Yeah. I mean, you know, that was a hard thing with the drug legislation was when we're going through all of this a few years ago. And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in Washington State. But I remember talking to the legislatures going like, I've gotten phone calls from crying parents asking me to go and arrest their child because at least they know for that weekend their baby's safe. You know, their baby is alive in jail, because without that, they don't know. This could be the weekend where they overdose. And I think there's also this fallacy of where, as a society, it's almost been divided, where you have one side that goes, oh, we need compassion. This is an addiction. This is they need treatment. Then the other side that says they need accountability. They need to be in jail. The reality is they need both.
They need both.
Yeah,
they need both. You know, lots of places reference Portugal because they essentially legalized drugs years ago. But they did it correctly. So if I catch you with drugs in Portugal, as a police officer, I take you to the magistrate right there to get you into treatment. If you decline treatment and you get caught with drugs again, you go to jail. So essentially, you're being held right away and taken to someone who says, here's a treatment plan. Here's what you're going to go into inpatient. Here's the steps. Do you agree to it? They say, yes. What we did in Washington, Oregon is we said, hey, you have drugs. Hey, here's a postcard with some phone numbers on it. Call it for treatment.
And then they go back to their tent and smash a car window out.
Yep.
Well, and the reality too is these people, there's a lot of them that, you know, they're happy where they're at and they want to stay addicted. But there's some that are fighting like crazy to get out of that addiction. And we've had a couple in my jurisdiction that they've been really sad stories to see them be absolutely decimated by heroin, fentanyl, get into treatment, get out, and then fall back into it. Not because they wanted to, but because of their environment and how much that addiction really clings to them.
Yeah.
And so it's not a thing of like, oh, let me give you a pamphlet. Now, the light bulb above your head and everything's fine and everything's gonna be okay. It's like they really need help and support to get out of it because it is terrible.
And the fucked up thing is, and I go back and forth on it because I look at society as a whole, and then I look at like some motherfuckers trying to pull the outboards off my boat, right? And it's like, if I catch you pulling the outboards off my boat, it's not going to be pretty, right? But then the other side of the coin is, man, these fucking people are literally in a living hell. And I'm not going to say them by name, but we have several teammates that are some of the best fucking people in this gym that used to be addicted to methamphetamine and heroin.
Yeah.
And so that shows you right now, like, there is a path out of this and a path back to a life that you feel proud of yourself and you're fulfilled and you feel like you're integrating back into society. That path is available, but it's like every path that leads somewhere good, it's usually an arduous one.
Well, and if you're going to approach the problem, which is incredibly nuanced, but from a perspective of like wanting to be compassionate and have empathy, then if you really care about the problem and learn anything about it, you'll realize that removing consequence and accountability isn't compassionate. You just allow them to stay in that terrible position.
Yeah, I mean, would you ever use that as a parenting technique?
Absolutely not.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hey, I've jokingly, and I guess not jokingly, told Marcus, bro, write a book on parenting. You want to have a retirement plan that's going to pay you 10 times what you make as a cop? Because his kids are the best kids that I've had through the gym.
Yeah.
Motivated, hard workers, respectful, like Rocco. Jenny always tells me, he's like, dude, Rocco used to, like, if I was out in the parking lot carrying stuff in, be like, hey, Jenny, can I help you carry stuff in? Like, just good-hearted kids.
Yeah.
But when the bell goes off, he will kill you. He will.
Well, while being polite and smiling the whole time. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, it makes me sad that you guys are moving to Missouri because Rocco was one of the teammates that I used to know. Like, hey, he's 13 and he's a little savage, but when he's 19, he's going to be beating the brakes off me.
Yeah.
And bro, I look forward to this generation of kids that's 12, 13, 14 growing into adulthood. Like Hayden's kind of our first one that we got to witness go from kids belts to adult belts. And now he trains with us, right? There's going to be 30 of them in 3 years.
I love showing up early and watching the kids class.
Yeah.
And watching some of them going like, that 9-year-old just try and do De La Hiva?
Yeah.
Sitting there watching going like, some of them are just kids being frantic.
Yeah.
Some of them though, you're
and then
like,
you got kids like Elijah, who's 9 and he's a yellow belt and he can hit you with double legs. He can barambolo. He can jiu-jitsu anywhere.
Yeah.
He looks so calm while he does it. He just relaxed, getting after it.
It is insane watching some of them.
You know what's interesting about that dynamic is him and his twin brother, Evan. It's like Elijah just fell in love with jiu-jitsu and Evan's just kind of, he likes it. He has fun. He has good energy. He's happy when he's here, but it's a different thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's strange how, I guess this is not just kids, just people in general, but when you see it in kids, man, some kids just jump in feet first and love that like immersion of jiu-jitsu.
Well, I think what I loved about it is I had done, 6 or 7 years of stand-up before. And then I tried jiu-jitsu and stand-up was checkers, in boxing, there's 6 different angles of punches, not saying there's not a tremendous amount of skills to it and technique, but then you go to jiu-jitsu where, like you said, 8 years later, I'm like, I've never heard that before, or I've never tried that before, or
about something basic. Yeah.
Well, and this is what I say about striking, because to be an Anderson Silva level striker, it is a jiu-jitsu black belt journey, right? It is a 20-year journey. But the difference, in my opinion, is if I work mitts and do sparring with you religiously for 1 year, I'm going to be able to outstrike most human beings. I feel like 1 year of jiu-jitsu it's just starting to come together for you now.
That's exactly what I tell people. Like, you look at the Paul brothers, Logan and I can't remember the other one's name, but
Jake.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed I know that, but I do.
And I'm ashamed to admit that, when I watch their last boxing, I'm like,
those kids can fight, bro.
They're getting good, because everyone in the MMA community want to be like, oh, they're a joke. But
bro, when you're
hard.
knocking out Tyrone Woodley, you're not a joke.
Yeah.
You can say whatever you want about him. And, he only fights washed up MMA. Bro, UFC world champion. I don't want to fight Tyrone Woodley right now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, dude?
And I mean, you look at like a year of dedicated striking, and you can go from nothing to feeling good. A year of jiu-jitsu, you're still like, oh man, I didn't get tapped out as many times.
Yeah.
Still the punching bag.
And I remember, God, I don't remember who this was, but it was a professional boxer. And he said something about, give me 1 year, I'll come over to MMA and fucking tune anyone up. And it's like, bro, remember when James Toney thought he could do that?
Yeah.
You remember that fight? He called out Randy Couture. He was a heavyweight boxer. He goes, man, this UFC stuff, Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, any of those guys, I'll knock out in one round. Like, just overconfident. And Randy Couture ankle picked him like he would ankle pick my wife. It wasn't even like any one of us could take this dude down. And now your boxing is gone.
Yeah.
Remember Art Zimmerman in UFC 1? He wore one glove.
Oh, no.
Dude, he wore a boxing glove and he fought Hoist Gracie. And they're like, why are you wearing a boxing glove? He goes, dude, this is just a sporting event. If I hit this guy with a right without a glove on, it'll kill him. Hoist Gracie didn't get hit one time.
Wow.
Body lock takedown and mounted him, and the guy tapped him out. You know?
man.
Just pressure?
Bro, like mother's milk mount.
Wow.
I'm done, dude.
Yeah.
It's a different fucking thing, man.
Well, you get in any one of those martial arts, you get used to the rule set that everybody is playing by.
Yes.
And then when all of a sudden you're in an environment that changes it, like going from boxing to MMA or jiu-jitsu, all of a sudden all these things that are things we've all agreed to that you think of as like, this is just how it is, you realize like, oh, none of those were actually real. Like they're just agreements that we all had, and now the world has changed.
Yep. And dude, I talk about those agreements even here. I mean, we have lots of agreements here. And the reason we have them is because it's conducive to a safe training environment.
Yep.
But I tell the young guys, and this might not be applicable to everybody, but if you're like a Skylar or an Angel or Zach, like these young savages, man, get a little MMA in here and there.
Yeah.
Because what it did for me is it taught me where my jiu-jitsu is applicable in fighting and where my jiu-jitsu is applicable in the sport of jiu-jitsu. And they're not necessarily vastly different, but there is some nuances there. Like I don't want to be doing inversion and shit where you can just stomp my head in.
Yeah.
You know? And like Joao talked about that too, because he said like a lot of people will shit on sport jiu-jitsu as not being self-defense. And he used to say, man, go fight me in the parking lot then. We'll see what happens. I was like, no, I don't want to fight you.
Yeah.
You're traditionally trained in sport jiu-jitsu, but those dudes will fucking murder you too.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's a good thing for a man to have an understanding of where your jiu-jitsu is applicable and where we're kind of playing a game. But I don't say that with any negativity. Like the game of jiu-jitsu is fun. Sometimes I want to lock up a lasso and see if I can off balance you and see what happens. I'm probably not doing that in a street fight, you know? But like I always say, when I drive home and I pass the community basketball court, I don't roll my window down and say, hey kids, how is that applicable in a fight?
Yeah.
Not everything we do has to be applicable in a fight. I just think it's important to discern what is applicable and what is just moving your body, having fun, learning new movement patterns, whatever it is.
Well, if you're really in a fight, then there's some tactical decision making that you're going to go through, right? Like the decision to invert or to, throw lasso, something like that. Like it's just not going to add up in a fight. You know that it's not appropriate. And yet at the same time, there could be an opening where somehow that does make sense.
Well, bro, and that's the thing too. Like never say never, right? Because if you got a Carhartt jacket on and I get a hold of your sleeve and it's in a parking lot with some type of surveillance camera, you better believe I'm going to do an inverted lasso to an omoplata sweep to a mounted triangle,
highlight,
and then go in and be like, "Hey, can I get that footage for my Instagram?"
I think it's why it's important to mess around and kind of play with other disciplines sometimes, because you learn, even if it's not going to be something you love to do and going to be your passion, you learn a respect for the skill set and the capability of people in it. And also then you can fundamentally avoid some of their strengths.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Did you guys happen to see the video going viral this morning of the drunk chief showing up to the traffic stop?
Oh, no.
No, I heard about it. I haven't seen it though.
I can't wait to show you when we're done.
Yeah.
But dude, it's a sergeant conducting a traffic stop with a couple of his guys.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the chief shows up on scene, but he's drunk.
Oh
It's very
my
clearly
gosh.
that he's drunk.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, Sergeant, get over here. What's up with that coat? That coat's out of regs. Take that coat off right now. It's ridiculous. You're a sergeant. And he's like, fine, chief. Like, you want to gig me for a coat in the middle of a DUI collision? Fine. Takes his coat off, throws it in his car, starts walking back over. And he goes, I'm not done talking to you. He goes, well, I'm done talking to you. I'm in the middle of a investigation.
Yeah.
And the chief goes, you can't walk away from me. What do you think you're doing? And he walked up and grabbed the sergeant. And the sergeant grabbed him by the neck and slammed him on the hood of the car and goes, get your fucking hands off me.
Wow.
You don't show up on my scene with my men and assault me and try and embarrass me about a coat. Get out of here. Right? And the chief's like, you're relieved of duty immediately.
Oh boy.
So it's the biggest clusterfuck you've ever seen. Come to find out, that chief got fucking put on leave, and now he retired.
So if you're looking for a job,
Right? Apparently.
yeah,
Jeez. But it's so crazy. Like, for me, that reiterates so much about the profession. Is it's like we used to say "fuck up, move up." Chief,
man.
Chief, have you heard that?
no.
Because it honestly, like, just because someone holds a leadership position inside of these agencies, man, half the time the people below them seem to have more competence in the job. And it's a strange dynamic where obviously you have to incentivize promoting to a certain degree. If you have more responsibilities, you should be compensated for it, right? I get that. But at the same time, if people are entirely motivated to take a commander position or a sergeant position just because of whatever pay bump, I think that's kind of a recipe for disaster too. And I don't know what the right answer is, but what I saw in the Marshal Service specifically, the jump between what we used to call POD, plain old deputy, to supervisory deputy was between GS 12 and 13. And once you hit 13, you get a $25,000 raise.
Wow.
So it's like, hey, I be a supervisor. I get all this. That's a substantial fucking raise.
So, it is so interesting that you brought up that point, because it's something I've actually been thinking about a lot, and I don't know the answer, because you're right, especially at a small agency, you reach a point where maybe I'm not inclined to be a leader, but I'm having a kid or I want to buy a home. And so you look and go, well, the only way for me to really make that, next level would be to promote to become a sergeant. Certain companies, they're almost creating a professional technical track to where you could get those same pay bumps, but you don't want to be in charge of people, but maybe you want to be in charge of projects or technology or stuff like that. And so as a profession, trying to kind of figure out how do we create these opportunities so that you have an officer that could be an incredible officer, has no interest in being a sergeant or commander or assistant chief or chief, but to still allow opportunities for that officer to grow both professionally and also, financially too.
Yeah.
Because, our contract after 5 years, you're topped out. You're going to get longevity. But I mean, in a 30-year career, you've reached top pay at 5 years in.
Yeah.
I'm like,
which is kind of crazy.
It's insane to think that.
But at the same time, it's like, well, they're just doing the same job. So why should we be paying them more?
Yep. Yep. And so I don't know what the right answer is. The other thing that's always amazed me about our profession too is it's very tough for mid-level leadership to transfer. If I wanted Marcus to come work for me, he's not coming over as a sergeant. He's coming over as an officer. And then he's working his way up maybe to be. And so that stops a lot of lateral movement of good leaders. Where in the private sector, you could be like, oh yeah, I do this job here. I'm a manager at
Amazon.
Amazon. let me go over to Expedia and become a manager there and you know, bring a lot of that experience. And so we lose a lot of that too internally because we don't allow that that transfer. I mean, I as a sergeant, I wouldn't transfer over because I'm like, great, I'm going to start over as bottom patrol officer, working night shift, don't get vacation bids.
That reset in your
Seniority
is a big deal. Yeah, even if you know you go to an agency where they're going to pay just as well, you're likely back working the least appreciated shift for whatever that agency is, which oftentimes is a graveyard shift. You're the last person to get your vacation. You're going to get that after all the other people.
Yeah,
it's a real impact.
And dude, it's also a lot of it is by chance because like, and I don't know if most agencies do this, but at the port, it's literally badge number seniority based on date of hire, period. Right. And so I got hired at the very beginning of a massive hiring push where I think they got like 50 new officers in the 3 or 4 years I was there. And then dude, I was a pretty senior guy in a quick amount of time.
Yeah.
And then I had some other old school guys that had been there a while. It's like, Greg, you're lucky. It took me 8 years to get ahead of 50 people, you know? And it's like, so you switch that. Now it's a roll of a dice because there's some guys that you if you catch them at the tail end of a big hiring push, you might be at the bottom of the totem pole for 5 years.
Oh yeah.
And bro, graveyards for 5 years, that would cause suicidal ideations.
Yeah, we've got a guy on our agency that I think he spent, I think it was 10 or 12 years on graveyards because he couldn't get off of it. He was the junior person. And he was just that. He was at the tail end of like a hiring push. So there's a bunch of people that were hired and then everybody's waiting, 20 years. And so it took him
That's nuts,
a full
dude.
decade to get off of working graveyards.
Are you on swing? Is that what it's called?
No, I work graveyards right now.
Oh, you are graveyard.
Yep.
Okay. Dude, you're crazy, man.
Well,
because you leave the gym usually. I mean, you're leaving right now here at 4. You have to leave by 4:30.
Yep.
Okay. And then are you doing 12s?
Yeah, we do 12.
Got it. So it's the same as the port then.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I'm a graveyard supervisor and I could work days. But in looking at the hours that I'd be around, it works better for me to work graveyards to see my kids and to be a part of their days.
Because this is the thing that I always struggled with graveyard. And again, I didn't have to work it very long because I gained seniority quickly. But what I found is the guys that kind of kill it at being on graveyard, they live graveyard when they're not on duty. You know?
They don't leave that sleep schedule.
Yeah, they stay. But bro, when you have little kids, it's not even possible.
Yeah.
Like, so port was 3 or 4 days on and then 3 or 4 days off. It bounced back and forth to meet the requirement of hours monthly. But dude, I'm not going to be off for 4 days sleeping in all day and being up all through the night.
Right.
So I would flip flop every single time. And that's fucking hard on you, man.
It is. Yeah, it is so tough. So I worked, graveyard, didn't have a kid at the time, loved it. Then worked day shift, did a graveyard overtime shift when my son was 3. And yeah, you're right, it is drastically different. You hear them running, opening the door. You hear mom or wife being like, no, dad's sleeping,
Yeah.
And you're like, man, I do
not anymore.
Yeah, I do not know how to do this with a toddler. Or then they're in school and you're missing their whole day.
Yeah, it's rough. I don't fully switch, but like on my work days, obviously I'm graveyard, and then on my days off, I'm kind of naturally a night owl. Like I don't like getting up early. I'm not a 4:30 guy.
Bro, I'm not. We don't talk about 4:30 in this studio.
So
Jocko's morning routine is not welcome around here.
Not for us. Yeah,
bro. I'm only 43. I don't feel like I'm that old, but bro, I can't get after it at 5 a.m. Like, there's no way I'm going to do rounds with you guys. Like, Lappin used to do a 5 a.m. class.
Wow.
Where they would and bro, he'd have like 20 people on the mats at 5 a.m. running a regular class like we run. Not a fucking chance, dude.
Yeah.
I don't slap and bump before noon.
Yeah, I don't know if it's mental weakness or not, but I like to have my coffee. I like to be up for a little while, and a couple hours into my day, I'm like, all right, it's time to start getting after it. But it's not first thing for me.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Well, fuck, dude. Let's. We're almost at 2 hours. I like to keep the show about 2 hours, and I know you got to get out of here shortly. What time do you have to get out of here? By 4:30?
Yeah, I got to leave by 4:30.
Okay, so we got 20 minutes. Let's back away from law enforcement for a second, and I'm curious, just your personal jiu-jitsu journeys. What do you guys feel like you're struggling with the most right now? Are you like stuck in a plateau, or because it always seems like there's an ebb and flow. You either feel great about jiu-jitsu or you fucking hate jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I feel like I'm still on a good trajectory up, and mainly because it's easy to stay curious and excited about learning the new things. So there's parts of my jiu-jitsu game that I feel stronger with, like standing takedowns, working from side control, and so I'm spending a lot more time trying to find ways to attack the back or work from different guards, because unless I'm going with somebody who's just really physically a beast or much more proficient at jiu-jitsu, I don't often get there. So finding some ways to explore that. Honestly, my biggest hurdle right now, just with dealing with all the work and then moving, has been consistency on the mat.
Yeah.
And that's driving me crazy. But otherwise, when I'm on it, I'm having a blast.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, I think for me is we talked about this a couple weeks ago, is fighting my fight. I have a tendency of when I slap and bump, if they wrestle, I'm gonna wrestle. If they where I have a tendency to try and match their style of jiu-jitsu versus me doing my style, and then
and it's ego.
Yeah. If someone I catch myself, if someone tries to move on me and it doesn't work, I try and submit. Yes, I try and submit them with the same move. But then, kind of like what Mark said, I've actually intentionally been trying to play more kind of like close guard or different positions, because you get in a habit of almost finding yourself in the same positions, doing the same submissions. Like I find myself in side control and doing darts.
Yeah.
Side control, darts. Side control, dart. And so I found myself the other day with a like newer white belt, and I found myself there, and I just kind of stopped because I'm like, what do I learn from this if I just, and so I let them sweep me, played close guard, played butterfly, because your butterfly guard is probably one of the most annoying things in my life.
That's my shit right there.
It is. Your butterfly guard is my Lex Luthor. As I sit there, and so I keep trying to play around with it, but I just don't find myself in that position a lot. So
bro, I'll tell you, learning to be very proficient at implementing butterfly sweeps, in my opinion, is the best way to learn how to defeat them. Yeah. Because it teaches you all of those little micro angles and adjustments. Like, dude, if my hips are faced towards the ceiling, I can't butterfly sweep you. I have to cut an angle. And even if it's like, it might even be like 2 degrees, right?
Yeah.
And when I feel people, like they have butterfly hooks in and they move my hips a little bit, I move them back. Like, no, you ain't setting me up for a sweep.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in butterfly. But once you get good at butterfly, I feel like it's almost unstoppable.
Yeah.
I did a bunch of butterfly sweeps in MMA fights too. And so that put the seal of approval on it. It's like, even when people are trying to punch you in the face,
still works.
They're actually putting their weight forward, boom, and it works, And I'm surprised we don't see more butterfly in high level MMA.
Yeah.
It's hard to not feel really silly while being butterfly swept. Like, there's not much more psychologically impacting than that. Just, hook in, and all of a sudden you're off balance. You're like, gosh darn it, here we go.
Yeah, dude. Again?
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Yeah. Where if I move forward or back half an inch, I'm getting swept. And then you sit there and you go, but I also know I can't just stay here for 6 minutes. And then,
what about you kind of touched on it, but what's going well?
I think for me, I've been doing my stand-up is feeling a lot better, like both defending takedowns. I used to have this thing where I was just getting double-legged all the time, where I'm feeling pretty good at stopping that.
And we got good wrestlers too, man. I feel like, I mean, not everybody's Jordan, but if you can start to fend off fucking Daniel and Skylar and like, your counter wrestling can get very good here.
Yep. And I think that's where, learning, I don't need to out wrestle them. I just need to frustrate them.
Yeah.
I just need them to get, Marcus to get frustrated enough that he screws up on a double leg or something else. So, there's no way I'm getting my hips lower than Marcus. So I just need
Zing.
Yeah. So
No, but bro, like what you said about like, hey, if someone does something to me, I'm going to do it back to you, right? And how old are you now?
37.
37. So you're not old man yet, but you'll be there soon.
Yeah.
And it's like at 43, when I'm in shape, I still feel like, dude, I don't give a fuck if you're 22. I'm just as good of an athlete as you.
Yeah.
But I think I'm starting to realize like maybe that day is not here yet, but it's starting to approach.
Yeah.
And what I find is like if I try and have like a barn burning takedown session with Skylar, I start to play into his hand because that's where he wants to be.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's like, you know what? I'm not going to play into this frantic fucking faking shots and scrambling and fucking like, I'm just going to grab a hold of you and put a foot on your hip and very slowly and methodically dump you over and land on top of you feeling like 500 pounds of bricks. And I'm like, dude, the more I try and back away from intensity when people are trying to be intense, the more success I have.
Yeah.
And even after 20 years of this shit, it's still like surprising to me. It's like, dude, I'm trying less and I'm better. What's going
better.
on?
Yeah.
You know? What about you, Marcus? Anything that you feel like you've had a lot of success with lately?
Yeah, I mean, I naturally fall developed half guard. And just, my body type works well for it, and so it's something I've spent a lot of time in, and so I feel really good there. Had some fun exploring some different ways to transition in and out of it. So that's feeling really pretty stable. And then you had a segment where you're re-going over knee on belly and a bunch of attacks from there, and I kind of keyed in on that. And I'd had a bunch of ways that I was attacking from side control and mounting, and then really put some effort toward. Well, I'm gonna play around with this knee on belly. It plays to some of my physical advantages.
Bro, knee on belly is great for scramblers.
Yeah, yep,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? Because you can. There's not a lot of positions where you can transition back and forth between a ton of pressure and then floating.
Yep.
But knee on belly is one of those, just back and forth. Whatever suits your offense, and sometimes being light suits your offense.
Yeah. Well, and I find that I then catch people in good scrambling opportunities where they might be really technically proficient, but we're now in a scramble, and there's some ways that I've found some good advantage in that. So, and it's fun. So
yeah, dude, half guard is endless.
Yeah,
I geeked out on half guard almost the whole time I was in California, and that was like my hub almost the entire time I was a brown belt.
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
Yeah, whenever I end up rolling with Daniel, I try to get there relatively quick because he's so darn good standing up, and if I get somewhere else, he's so dangerous.
Bro, it's funny you say that because half guard is the only guard I'll play on Daniel.
Really?
Yep. And I have one sweep from half guard. I don't know if we worked it last week where you have lockdown and then you dive underneath and you switch the lockdown.
Yeah.
Were you here for that one?
I didn't see it.
I'll show you before you go.
Yeah.
It's the only sweep that works on Daniel.
Then I want to know.
That's it. There's one sweep and that's the one. Last question. What's your guys' favorite part of just being part of this team and being part of a jiu-jitsu academy?
I think for me, being part of this team specifically is you have this. Everyone is a savage. You talked about last night. It doesn't matter that there isn't an easy roll in the gym, which is incredible. But there also isn't this. You go to some gyms and you show up and there's a lot of you see this at MMA gyms, not necessarily up here, but down in Clark County where I lived before. You show up and it's almost like you're either the performer, the athlete, and you get the attention. If you're not, you don't get the attention. But then there's also this, you need to prove yourself. It feels more like an initiation. Like, you show up your first day at the gym and you just know like, man, I'm just going to get my ass beat for the next 10 minutes where we do not have that. Like, it doesn't matter who you roll with. Everyone is respectful, nice. But once the clock goes, I mean, you're going hard. I think being part of jiu-jitsu is, it's less about the mat and more about the personal development that happens with it. You know, you learn how to deal with adversity. After doing, 30 minutes of grueling, getting choked out here. But not only that, most people in society would do that for day one and then not return.
Yeah.
So it's those people that show up on day 2, day 3 that already, I mean, that's huge improvement. And I think that has led to my success probably more than anything else. It's just learning that, yeah, it doesn't really matter how bad today is.
Yeah.
I know tomorrow it's going to be a new day and I start over again. And, it builds that resiliency, I think.
I love hearing that, man. And that's like almost verbatim when Sean was on Joe Rogan a couple months ago. He goes, the thing I love about my gym is I know no other part of my day is going to be as hard as the hour and a half I'm at that gym.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a freeing mindset because it's like, okay, everything's easier from here on out for the rest of the day,
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, the thing I really love and appreciate about this gym is the camaraderie around intensity. Right? Because it's one thing to have somebody to, fight to the death with, but then it's another when afterwards, like you genuinely care about each other and enjoy each other. It's not a jockeying for position or posturing or there's not a lot of anger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things that I can roll with anybody in our gym. And if they want to go as hard as me, then we're just going to end up smiling at the end and being grateful that the other person was there for it.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. And then the thing I really like about jiu-jitsu is that it works perfectly with my mindset for how I approach work, which is earn your place every day, right? Like you don't rest on your past laurels. There's so much more to learn. It's so deep. It's so complex. It's not a thing where you reach a standard or a place and you're like, all right, I'm good now. You have to stay on the grind.
Like such is life. You know?
Exactly. And it's an easy place to develop discipline, and mental toughness. And then those things apply to the rest of your life, like to your professionalism, to how you are as a learner, right? To how you continue to educate yourself, to your relationships. So to me, it's the easy place to work on these things that I can translate to being better at all the other things that I really care about.
Yeah, dude. Well, I appreciate you guys coming out. It's already 2 hours and 6 minutes. That went by quick, man.
Yeah, it really does.
And I'm still upset you're leaving the team.
Me too.
You said end of May? We have an official date now?
Not quite official date yet, but it's been hard being away from the family.
I hear you, bro. I lived that life a long time, like bouncing back and forth. And it's, we talked about it a little bit offline, but it's hard to have your family out of state. I'll fly down every other weekend and all that stuff, but it never comes together like you think that it will.
Yeah.
That's just the reality of it. We need to be there for our families, and you know that.
Yep.
But that's life, dude. And I think it's important, we didn't touch on this, but I do think one thing that a lot of cops get caught up in is, dude, I work for this agency and this is my life and I'm stuck here for eternity, and you're like, hey, I got to go. It's time to go on to greener pastures. That may include more law enforcement. It may not. Time will tell. But I'm fucking proud of you, bro, because I know a lot of people, like, they get trapped by that fear, and you're like, nah, fuck it. I'll move across the country again and see what happens.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Yep.
All right. Do you guys, you guys are both on Instagram?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you cool with me tagging you guys in the show notes?
Yeah.
Okay. Because a lot of times people hear a show, we have a lot of cops and whatnot that listen, and they may want to reach out for feedback or just a question on whatever. So I think it's cool to connect listeners to you guys. So I'll put that in the show notes below.
Sounds good.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks for having me.